Once again, you are welcome to this program, and I really do hope that we have a great time. Let's look at the concept from the definition. What is authentic leadership? And but before I give you the definition, there's something I'm going to move to so that you will have an understanding of what we are doing here and what this program will not cover. So there are two basic approaches to authentic leadership. And one of them is the practical approach, and the other one is a theoretical approach to authentic leadership. And so just a little bit of history about it. In 2000, in the early 2000s, we are all familiar with the fall of Aaron and other Arthur Anderson. And so there was a kind of leadership that was felt to be missing at that time. And we felt that a lot of leaders there was an issue of integrity that resulted in misstatement of financial statement and all that. And so people begin to look at, why is character in capital letter, why was it missing? And so leaders begin to look inwards, first of all, the inner mind, trying to see, look at themselves and say, what is missing? And so the proponent or the leader of the practical approach to leadership, the man called Bill George, which I'm going to talk a lot about, decided to really look at the concept. And so he wrote the first book called Authentic Leadership. And so this is the book called Authentic Leadership. So this was the first book that he wrote, even though he went further to write so many other books. So this is it, Authentic Leadership. And so, and he was trying to rediscovering the secret to creating lasting values. So he felt that values, ethical boundaries, principles were missing. And so 2003 was the time he wrote the book, and he was the father and the person who actually defined the practical approach to authentic and leadership. But in 2005, scholars from the leadership world converged in the US, which was led by one like Wolumba, who is a great scholar in leadership, and Bruce Avalio, who is also another great scholar, and many other scholars converged at a seminar to discuss authentic leadership. And so they wanted to understand what is authentic leadership? What should we be looking out for in authentic leadership? And so they also wanted to know, because from a theoretical framework perspective, which is for those who are researchers, you don't want to know about a concept in terms of practically. And so Bill George, which is Williams George, was talking so much, explaining so much in terms of what the leader should be and how the leader should be authentic, both in fact home and in the workplace. But we need to, from a research perspective, researchers want to know, how do we measure it? And so this group of persons, scholars in leadership, converged in the US, and they provided dimensions with regard to the theoretical approach. And that seminar and the aftermath, immediate aftermath of that seminar, produced what you would call the theoretical approach, and a lot of the questionnaires you have today, which are the leading, the authentic leadership questionnaire, already the authentic leadership survey. So quite a number, I think about 4 standard survey and questionnaire in that you can use today from a research perspective to test the effect of authentic leadership on a lot of work-related outcomes, such as commitment, satisfaction, organizational justice, and others. And so it's just good to provide this background. But this program really, 1.5 hours, we won't be able to cover both the practical and the theoretical approach. So we will confine ourselves to the practical approach to authentic leadership. But it's going to be a great journey, the practical approach. And if we have another time with any of the organizations at a later date or in the future, we'll be able to take them through the dimension of the theoretical approach, which is also a very interesting one. And so we are going to start, but the definition that I've chosen here, which is this definition, is actually from the theoretical group. And so authentic leadership is a pattern of leader behavior that draws upon and promotes both positive psychological capacities and a positive ethical climate to foster greater self-awareness and internalize moral perspective, balanced processing of information, and relational transparency on the part of leaders, working with subordinates, very critical, fostering positive self-development. And if you unpack this definition, that would actually be what would be the dimension of authentic leadership from a theoretical perspective. But just to share a little bit of light before I move away from this, in authentic leadership, it's so much about what you call the positive psychology and positive organizational behavior, which is that leaders shouldn't just be seeing the negative side of things. And so in this COVID-19 crisis, what are the positive? What are the upside? And so when we say upside, what are the things that you think are beneficial at this time? And so positively is seeing things in the good side of things in a difficult situation. And so they are saying that you should adopt the positive organizational behavior, or what you call positive psychology, in crisis time. And so in a COVID-19 time, you must look at it from what are the positives that you can take from it as an individual. But he said it starts with self-awareness. Every man must know himself or herself. Every woman must know herself. It starts from there, both the practical approach and internalized moral perspective. There must be a moral dimension to your life. We spoke so much about it when we dealt with transformational leadership, that James McGregor Burns, who is the father of transformational leadership, made us to understand that a leader who exhibits or has all the characteristics of a transformational leader cannot be referred to as a transformational leader if it doesn't imbibe the moral underpinnings of transformational leadership. And he went ahead to talk about balanced processing of information. What does it really mean? It means that whenever information is passed on to you, you need to look at it from the pros and cons. So, for example, what motivates you? Are they intrinsic factors or extrinsic factors? How do you balance that as an individual to make sure that you are not overly weighed to just extrinsic factors that motivates you to do things as an individual, right? So it's also talk about balance. It talk about relational transparency. How do you relate with people? Who are those that are in your circle of influence? Who can you count on in times of crisis? As you're in crisis time, if you are in need of fund, you need to pay school fees. So those are some of the theoretical, some of the issues that were addressed in the theoretical perspective by Bruce Avalio, Wolumba, and others. But we are not going to be moving into that realm, that dimension of theoretical leadership, because it is really broad and the time is limited. And so from the Bijosh perspective, it is important for us to understand authentic leadership. And so who is an authentic leader? It starts from here. An authentic leader is one who can align people around shared mission and values. And so if you are working in an organization, you want to know how do you understand the mission, the values, the vision of the organization? How are you able to take your people into embedding them into what your vision and your values have? So how are you able to empower them to leading from the front authentically, while serving all stakeholders? How do they balance the stakeholders that they service and collaborating with others to sustain superior results? We are all working in teams. Whether you're an employer, you're an employee, we are all working in teams. So you need to balance that. It's very, very important. You need to balance that. And so authentic leaders align people around shared mission and values and empower them to lead while serving all stakeholders and collaborating with others to sustain superior results. So approaches to authentic leadership. I've mentioned this: practical approach and theoretical approach. And I've taken my time to explain that. There's no need to repeat that. So I will move on from here. So we have the practical approach, we have the theoretical approach. We are dealing with the practical approach here. And so the practitioner perspective to authentic leadership. So like I've said, in the early 2000s, with the fall of Enron and Anderson, You know, the death of misconduct shocked the world. There were a lot of concerns in terms of what had happened in the business world. It was a very challenging time for business. And, you know, the issue of integrity was at stake. It was observed that a lot of leaders were pursuing what you would call short-term goals at the detriment of the long-term sustainable interest of their organization. And so the aforementioned shock therapy made people to realize that something was sorely missing in many companies at that time. People were concerned, people were worried, like we are now. Most participants here, quite a number of us, we are working in organizations. We have our jobs right now. But one thing that is certain is that we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. We don't know what is ahead of us. COVID-19 in Nigeria, we've not even started what you would call, you know, the curve, flattening the curve. We've not even started flattening the curve. And so, and those in Lagos, Abuja, Ogun State and Lagos State, and those are in the Federal Capital Territory. But on the 4th, organization will be preparing themselves to resume. But the question is that there's a whole lot of unknown. And so, like it was in 2003, in the aftermath of the shock that happened in the global space, business space, where the great Arthur Andersen and the fall of Enron happened. In 2008, we have a similar problem when there was a global crisis. And so we are also in another time, in an uncharted territory. And so how do we begin to reflect based on what we know of what happened in 2003, the shock wave that engulfed the world? How are we able to learn from that experience? You know, and so it was observed at that time that what was really missing was leadership. And B. George was able to narrow it down to not just leadership in a broad sense, but authentic leadership. And that was really the foundation that spurred him to begin to do his research, and that led to the book that he wrote on authentic leadership. And so what is the case for new leadership? And so because of the happenings, the lack of, you know, integrity that occurred at that time, and also the lack of authenticity in the leaders that were operating at that time, a new kind of leadership was born. And that leadership was authentic leadership. And so in response to those violations, new laws and regulation was crafted to close the loopholes. And those of us who are compliance officers, who are lawyers, and who understand laws from different perspectives and jurisdictions, that was when the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 was given birth to. One of the most far-reaching laws that was enacted in the United States after the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 in the US during the Great Depression. And so the Sarbanes-Oxley Act was released, and quite a number of laws were released. And in 2008, when the crisis also occurred, the Dodd-Frank Act was also released, and quite a number of laws were released to be able to mitigate some of the challenges that came with earlier on in the fall of Enron and Andersen, and in the crisis, the global financial and economic crisis of 2008. But although some changes in regulation are appropriate, as it were at that time, and which we are going to see in the COVID-19 time, going to be a lot of changes. Budgets are going to be slashed. Countries are going to be looking at new ways. Countries are going to be requesting for debt forgiveness. Organizations are going to be looking at how they can continue to exist. Some organizations are going to be going under. And so a lot of unknown, a lot of time, anxiety will be happening, not just in Nigeria, but globally. No? So it was observed that most of the laws, as it were at that time, did not address the deeper issues that were at stake. No, you can set a lot of laws just to be able to mitigate what is happening in the spur of time. But it's impossible to legislate integrity, stewardship, and sound governance. And so leadership, governance, integrity, stewardship, service, selfless service are things that you really cannot legislate. And so as we begin to progress, during this COVID-19 time. A lot is going to be happening, but the question that you need to ask yourself, which is going to be you and you alone, we need to ask yourself, is my authenticity in doubt? Is my authenticity still intact? Is my integrity, my stewardship, my leadership, is it still available? Do I still have presence in the workplace, even in a teleworking world? Do my subordinates still feel my presence? Do I still maintain those boundaries? Or do I just send them email at this time? Do I just send scheduled meetings without even consulting? What do I really do at this time? So I can see some comments, but very important that, please, Mr. Ilo, if there are comments that you want me to pay attention to as we make progress, even though I would really prefer that we ask a lot of questions or take these comments almost at the end of the program. But if there are any that you think is critical enough for me to pay attention to as we make progress, I'll really appreciate that. Are you with me? So the situation demanded new leaders. Companies needed leaders who lead with purpose, values, and integrity. And please, as we move on, it's good for us to look at this word very critically. Purpose, values, and integrity. In short, a new kind of leader was needed, the authentic leader. And so in 2003, that was when the concept of authentic leadership actually came up. So, but again, we have old challenges. In 2009, in the year, in the 1920s, late 20s and early 30s, the Great Depression. In the early 2000s, the integrity issue that led to the fall of a lot of WorldCom, Anderson, and the rest. The way you have some of those challenges, even in 2008, in the global crisis, there's a new challenge now, which is a COVID-19 challenge. But one challenging era gone, integrity failure, another challenging era surfaces, COVID-19. But you can always connect it with this handshake to say, look, there are lessons that can be learned. And so, Bill just said that authenticity, authentic leadership leadership is about authenticity, not style. Leadership is not about style. And so, the authentic leader. So, what are some of the attributes, that we'll be looking at for today as we make progress from an authentic leader? So, authentic leaders genuinely desire to serve others through their leadership. And so, if you do not have that desire to really serve people, to serve first before you become a leader, then you can never be an authentic leader. More interested in empowering the people. So an authentic leader must have the interest to empower the people they lead to make a difference than they are empowered, money or prestige for themselves. So leadership from an authentic perspective is not really about the intrinsic motivations. You want to make money, what you want to do, you are self-centered. No, it's about the people you lead. How can you make their life better? Authentic leaders are guided by qualities of the heart, by passion and compassion. They have empathy as they are guided by qualities of the mind. It's not about result. How do you achieve that result? How do you feel? How do you relate with people? Authentic leaders lead with purpose, meaning, and values. They cherish the values they have. And if they are working in organizations or if they are entrepreneurs, they talk about the shared values. What are the values of that organization? And when you wake them up, they're able to tell you what the values are. They are very focused on the goals of the organization. They build enduring relationship with people, and people follow them because they know where they stand. People don't want to follow you because you are the leader, but they follow you because they know that you have their interests at heart. They are consistent and self-disciplined. When their principles are tested, they refuse to compromise. When things are going right, it's very easy for people to follow you. When things are going right, you have a lot of friends. But when challenging time comes, the question is that, where will your people be? Will they still be leading? Will they still be following you? So dedicated to developing themselves, authentic leaders must self-develop. It is very important because it is out of your self-development that you can begin to give. Because for those who are Christian, they say out of the abundance of the mind, the mouth speaketh. So it's very critical for us to understand that. So being your own person, authenticity really is about you as an individual. And so in these 3 leadership behaviors we will be talking about, we'll talk about the transformational leadership. And this one is the one that talks mostly about you as an individual. It starts with you, your authentic self. So leaders are all very different people. We are different. Any prospective leader who buys into the necessity or attempting to emulate all the qualities of another leader is doomed to fail. You need to be your natural person. You need to be yourself, your authentic self every day. Very, very key to what we do here. So the purpose of authenticity, what are the key facts? To become authentic, you must develop your own leadership style, consistent with your personality and character. To become authentic, it's not about emulating people. You can be influenced by others, but you must know that I am authentic. I am myself. I have my vision. I have my lifestyle. I have my character. And these are the things that drive me as a person. I have my life stories. I have my crucibles. And so you must begin to start by your stories. What are my stories? And how do you share those stories? And how do you connect those stories and the challenges, which are the crucibles that you have faced in life? Being true to the person you were created to be means accepting your fault as well as using your strength. Accepting your shadow side is an essential part. Understanding your strengths and weaknesses, what we call your sweet spot. What are your weaknesses? What are your strengths? Very important. What are your intrinsic motivators and your extrinsic motivators? What motivates you as a person? They are very, very key as we move ahead. So deciding to the core of authenticity, think of your decision being based on 2 concentric circles. As leaders, we must think of ourselves as taking decisions from 2 circles. In the outer circle are all laws, regulation, and ethical standards with which our company must comply. So what kind of organizations do you have? What kind of organization do you lead? What kind of a leader, does your subordinates, your colleagues see you as? Do they see you as those who are just out there to ensure that laws are complied with? So, for example, the president has spoken about COVID-19, the resumption that will be happening in Lagos, Ogun State, and Abuja. And I know that a lot of states will be following suit. And so, as a leader, are you just going to do what they call the minimum that the president have said? In terms of right now, everybody is going to be having face masks. So what is your own plan for your employees as they resume? How do you continue to maintain social distance? What is it that's going to change? What are the business continuity planning you're going to have? And so do you see just beyond the guidelines to see that those individuals who will be coming to your workplace, they are actually human beings. If anything happens to them, they are not numbers. They are human beings. They are people. They are persons. And so how do you go beyond the outer circle, what we call the outer part of the onion, that we're going to talk about as we proceed? And so in the inner circle are your core values. So the minimal approach would have been defined by the president or by state governors, but from your inner perspective, your organization, what are the core? How does it drive from your values? What values do you place on people and the people that you lead? And so those are the things. So just be damn sure that your decisions as a leader stay within your inner circle. Let it go beyond the periphery, the outer surface, and let it be deep. And so, have a deep dive in terms of the implication of resumption, and that how do you begin to dimension your employees? How do you begin to pick up their files to know who are those that have underlying illness or ailment? And how do you begin to plan with those individuals and your human resources department at this time for them to work home, to continue the teleworking that they've been doing? And so how do you segregate all that? How do you make provisions for all that? That is how authenticity will be treated, will actually be observed. That is a lens on which we are going to be looking at authenticity at this critical time.